Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our special meeting of council. It is October the 9th, 2025, 6 p.m., and I will call this meeting to order. Want to welcome everyone who's joined us in the gallery this evening. Thank you for attending, and those who are viewing from home. Before we begin, I just want to remind council and the gallery that this is a meeting held in the public. It's not a public meeting. I'm going to ask people to be respectful of people are going to have some speaking. Please, no outburst in the gallery, no clapping of hands, no disruptions are allowed at all. So unless you need me to read out the exact articles of the procedural bylaw, we'll dispense with that. Going to remind members of any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Seeing none, noted. Move on with delegations. First up, we have Barry Wade regarding the SCC expansion. Barry, would you please introduce yourself into the microphone so they understand who at home who you are? And please speak into the mic.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm Barry Wade. I'm a resident of Port Burwell.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mayor Ketchball and council for giving me this opportunity to speak this evening. I'd like to begin by expressing my appreciation to staff and A-Link Architecture for the excellent work they did on the tender. I also would like to acknowledge the staff for bringing forward an alternative plan for consideration. It is hard to believe that it's been 6 years since this project was first proposed. What began as a $2 million initiative has now grown to roughly $4 million all in. Several factors contributed to the increase: a larger building footprint, the impact of COVID, and rising material and tariff cost. But the result is clear. The taxpayers' contribution has risen from $500,000 to $2.4 million. Back in 2022, I suggested a more economical approach: renovate the existing servery. Very similar to what staff is now presenting as an alternative. At that time, the project cost to the taxpayer was under $500,000. I was going to focus on the project details tonight, but there's something more important to address than the growing sense of division in this municipality. People in Bayham are deeply connected to their communities, whether it's the provincial Port Burwell Lighthouse, the Vienna Lions Community Center, or the Stratfordville Hall. These places are more than buildings. They represent pride, heritage, and belonging. But over the last few years, I've seen how easily those connections can turn into points of contention when residents feel that decisions and dollars are not being distributed fairly across the municipality. When one community feels overlooked, it doesn't just create frustration with council, it breeds resentment between neighbors. No council can please everyone, but every council can strive for balance. That's what good leadership looks like. A balanced approach to capital investment, one that reflects the needs of all three wards. This will go towards restoring trust and unity within Bay. Council success should be measured by how many bylaws. Let me rephrase that. Council success shouldn't be measured by how many bylaws are passed or how many severances are approved. It should be measured by how well you unify the people you serve. Each of you bring valuable strengths to this table. Deputy Mayor Weisler reminds us how often the importance of care and respect is. Councillor Froese speaks frequently about need to work together. Councillor Emerson has constantly shown compassion for those less fortunate. And Councillor Chilcott has been steadfast in her services to residents across the municipality, north and south. Those values, care, respect, compassion, and service, are what residents need to reflect on in your decision to them. I know there are strong feelings about this project. But tonight you have an opportunity to send a message that transcends any one building. You can show that this council values fairness, balance, fiscal responsibility, that you see BAM not as three separate communities, but as one. That could mean supporting an affordable renovation for the existing Surrey and Stratfordville, while also allocating some of the funds accumulated over the last 6 years towards other community priorities, such as the restoration of the Port Burwell Lighthouse, or non-core capital projects identified throughout the municipality. This approach doesn't diminish Stratford's importance, it strengthens it by ensuring that every resident sees themselves reflected in this council's decision. The goal isn't halting progress, it's to share it. The goal isn't to divide, it's to unify. So I'm asking you to take a moment, not as a setback, but as an opportunity to build confidence across all of BAM communities. Let this be the night that council reaffirms its commitment to balanced growth, fiscal prudence, and community unity. Let this be the night that you remind residents that their voices matter and that thoughtful leadership listens, adapts, and unites. And perhaps fairest way to move forward would be to let people decide through a referendum style vote. Conduct openly and transparently so residents themselves can choose whether to take on new debt for this project. I appreciate being able to speak. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to.
Thank you very much for your comments. Does council have any questions for Mr. Wade? Yeah, thank you very much. Next up, yes, thank you. Motion that the delegation of Barry Wade regarding the SCC expansion be received for information. Do we have a mover and second? Councillor Chilcott, Councillor Emerson will second. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, next, I'm going to call Cindy Stewart to the podium. The same, Cindy, please state your name, speak into the mic. You have 10 minutes for a delegation.
My name is Cindy Stewart and I live in Stratfordville. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors, and our dedicated staff. Actually, I'd rather be doing anything right now than speaking publicly, but I am passionate about our community, so bear with me if I have to take breathing breaks. Thank you truly for taking the time to provide residents with such a detailed and thoughtful report on the proposed upgrade and expansion of the Stratfordville Community Center. I hope residents have taken the time to read the report and that anyone with questions has felt comfortable reaching out to staff for clarity, because this is an important moment for us all. This isn't just a building we are talking about, it's the heart of our community, a place where memories are made, where people connect, and where we all feel just a little more at home. 1.4 million. That's what was granted to the Stratfordville Community Center and Park in June 2021 through federal and provincial Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. It was meant to help revitalize the community center and improve one of the most loved parks in BAM. That grant came at a time when our community was under the weight of an $8 million debt. It was a difficult period, uncertain, stressful, and this funding felt like a glimmer of hope. A reminder that even in hard times, good things still come our way. Fast forward to today, 2025, and that debt is behind us. We made it, and now we stand at crossroads. Tonight, you'll decide whether or not to make use of that grant, whether we move forward to give this space a fully functioning kitchen and finally turn it into a truly complete hub with more meeting space and accessible features. Just imagine a space where teens learn to cook and feed their friends, where neighbors gather to share meals and stories, where we can offer more fitness activities and indoor games during the winter months, where crafts are made, skills are learned, budgeting classes are taught, and wellness programs that bring people together in support and care. This isn't about bricks and mortars, it's about building community. I know not everyone will agree. There are always going to be voices of doubt. But tonight, I ask everyone here to please try to set aside any personal biases and think about the many new families that have chosen to call Bayham home. Think of the children and the memories they'll grow up with, just like we did. We have a chance here to pass something on, something lasting, something that says you belong here. And finally, I just want to say, whatever decision council makes, it will be respected. But I do believe in this community, and I believe that this is a moment to lean into. Thank you all for listening and caring. The decision is yours, and it will be accepted with grace. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Does anyone have any questions for Mrs. Stewart? Councilor Froese?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. More of a comment, and can I also comment on the previous speaker? Or just on this one?
Typically, you just ask questions, but
No comments?
go ahead.
Thank you, Cindy. That was very unifying. I really appreciate that. As per Barry, he talks about being unified and being nice and all, and very deliberately leaves out the mayor. Like in his speech, that's divisive. Thank you, Cindy. That was a good speech.
Thank you.
Okay. Motion reads that the delegation by Cindy Stewart regarding the SCC expansion be received for information. Mover and seconder, Deputy Mayor Weiser, Councillor Chilcott. All in favor? That's carried. Moving on, we now move into the open forum. This is a limited to 2 minutes. Under the same format, I will invite each one up to the podium. Please state your name again so that the viewers at home know who you are. And then you'll have 2 minutes for your presentation. First up, Suzanne Schlatzhauer.
Good evening. I'm Suzanne. You said my name. I don't think I need to introduce myself again, but good evening, mayors and members of council. There's been a lot of noise and a lot of confusion around the SCC expansion project. One thing is clear, this project stirred strong feelings, but I think those feelings come from how deeply people care about their community. That's something worth recognizing, not resenting. I'm not here to get into the nuances. I'm here to speak about leadership, accountability, and respect for process, which are the foundations of good governance and the theme I've carried here for the past 6 years. When residents raised concerns that this project could approach $4 million, they weren't trying to be adversarial. They were trying to be informed. Now that the tenders confirm those costs, the question becomes not whether the project has value, but whether the process earned the public's confidence. Transparency isn't opposition, it's participation. Public scrutiny is not harassment. It's democracy in action. Leadership means meeting questions with clarity, not defensiveness, and remembering that every dollar spent belongs to the people who trusted you with it. So as you move forward, please do so with transparency and humility, because when residents are informed and respected, they become partners in progress, not obstacles to it. Because when people understand how and why decisions are made, they're more likely to stand behind them. I've listened closely to the discussions around the SCC, and while I understand that people have different opinions, what most of us share is a simple wish to feel informed, respected, and confident that our tax dollars are being spent wisely. And in the end, let's keep building something greater than any project, a culture of trust, accountability, and respect. And perhaps the most transparent path forward would be to let people decide through an open in-person vote under proper oversight. So this decision reflects the will of the community, not just the few. Thank you.
Thank you. Gatlin Sandu?
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Gatlin Sandu, and I'm a proud resident of Eden. I've called Bayham home for the past 4 years, and I've grown really to care about this community and its future. What I've learned since moving here is that small communities thrive when there is trust between residents and leadership. The trust that is built is clear, that trust is built through clear communication, accountability, and transparency. When those things slip, even good projects can divide people who actually want the same thing, a strong and sustainable Bayham. We're here tonight because everyone, no matter their view, cares deeply about this place. As you move forward with this major financial commitment, I hope you'll keep in mind that leadership isn't measured by how fast we spend, but by how wisely we plan. Many residents I speak with support improving community facilities, but they also want to feel heard, informed, and confident that their tax dollars are being managed with care. So I'll end this with a simple thought. Build what we need, not what divides us. Lead with transparency, and you'll rebuild the trust that makes Bayham strong. Thank you.
Thank you. Valerie Donald?
I'm Valerie Donald from Port Burwell. Let me thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. Thank you to staff for the excellent comprehensive report. And thank you to all that are here and those at home watching on Zoom for being involved in their community. Now, we have a project that at its heart is about creating a central community hub, a space that brings together diverse voices, strengthens social bonds, and builds a unified Bayham, a place where the spirit of one for all and all for one is more than just words. We have that opportunity with the expansion project that includes new upgrades and facilities, AODA washrooms that are accessible outside, a commercial kitchen, HVAC, and a concession for outside snack sales. While this project has been impacted by delays and reductions in scope, it will not be less costly with further delays. Bayham residents, you have proven that together we eliminated a $4 million debt. Now we have the latitude to invest in our Bayham, something that can shape our future. And not as a scattered collection of communities, but as one strong, connected whole, united. This hub is more than bricks and mortar. It's a place for residents from every part of Bayham to collaborate, contribute, and support each other. Together, we're building not just a facility, but our future. I thank you for the thoughtful consideration. Good night.
James Hicks?
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is James Hicks. I'm a resident of Bayham. I, like many taxpayers, I'm concerned about the level of spending being considered at a time when our community has only recently just paid down a major municipal debt. When the Stratfordville Community Center expansion was first proposed in 2021, it was a $2 million project, mostly funded by upper levels of government, but today the cost has nearly doubled to $4 million. Bayham is now responsible for more than $2.5 million of that amount. We all value community facilities, but we also understand limits. With over $90 million in core infrastructure needs ahead, roads, water, and wastewater, we can't afford to diverse resources from essential services. I've always lived in a simple motto, work with what you have. If there's 2 million available, then that's great. Let's make improvements within that budget and protect the taxpayers from unnecessary debt. Fiscal discipline isn't about saying no to progress. It's about ensuring that progress is sustainable. So tonight I'm asking council to lead with prudence and perspective, spend wisely, protect our reserves, and remember that good governance begins with living within our means. And perhaps the wisest step now would be to let the people decide, not through an open and transparent vote, whether Bayham should take on a new debt for this project and live within its means. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Laura Edwards, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of council. My name is Laura Edwards, and I'm a resident of Bayham. Like many here, I value community facilities and the role they play in bringing people together. But I also believe that fiscal responsibility must guide every major decision that we make. I've learned this over the past 3 years volunteering in a successful operation of the Vienna Alliance Community Center, a large 2-story hall with a fully equipped certified commercial kitchen that has been offering free clinics and programming for residents of all ages. We've only just finished paying off the multi-million-dollar debt from Ojibwa. Now council is considering borrowing again and drawing from reserves to finance a $4 million expansion of a non-core facility at a time when our infrastructure deficit exceeds $90 million. Yes, there's a 1.47 million grant on the table, but the municipality must cover the remaining 2.5 million and any cost overruns. This means new debt, reduced services, and less flexibility when core infrastructure begins to fail. We all want Bayham to grow and thrive, but real progress isn't about spending more. It's about spending wisely. Fiscal responsibility protects essential services, keeps taxes stable, and ensures that future councils still have options. So tonight, I'm asking council to pause, reflect, and lead with caution. Build what we truly need, not what puts us back into debt. Protect our reserves, protect our infrastructure, and protect and trust the people who pay the bills. And perhaps the most responsible course would be to let people decide through an open, transparent vote where taking on new debt for this project is truly in Bayham's best financial interest. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. All right, let's move on with section 5, reports to council. Report CAO 4125 by Thomas Thayer, CAO regarding tender award, Bayham Stratford Community Center expansion, ISIP Community Culture and Recreation Stream. Thomas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I apologize for the cough. I'll dispense with the history on this. We know that it's been a long time coming, and we know generally what the grant was originally for, shade over $2 million. We did go through a rescoping. The rescoping took approximately 16 months. That was handled approximately this time last year when council entered into the amending transfer payment agreement, and we took that direction and started working with A-Link again on final working drawings and the tender package. The tender package went out in August. It closed on the 16th of September, and we did the award. I was present at A-Link's office. The tenders received were 13, 12 were received before the 2 p.m. deadline, and 10 are summarized in the report. There were 2, unfortunately, that were disqualified due to incompleteness. The low bid was approximately $2.88 million. Now, to explain to council what the total bid and the base bid include in the table, the total bid includes base bid amount and $151,000 as a cash allowance to anybody who was eventually tendered the project. Included in the base bid were a number of separate bids. Some of these were separated out to identify what that cost would be in case council chose to use a reserve for more transparent accounting. These separate bids included the walkway around the park, the Old Chapel parking lot, plumbing chases in the main hall, wider doorways, and the millwork and the kitchen equipment. So these are all included in the base bid. And when you account for the 151,000 on top, you get the total bid, which does not include HST in the first table. In discussions with the architect, they also advised that they recommend a 10% contingency on the project due to the completeness of the tender package. So the total construction costs, excluding HST, were approximately $3.1, $3.2, $3.3 million in that range for the lowest bids. Now, because they are separate items, council has decisions to make in regards to what is included in the ultimate award. There are also a couple of alternate price items that were not included in the base bid, and if council chooses to accept those are either debits, additions, or credits, subtractions from the base bid amount. So in consideration of the received bids and the alternate and separate price items, in discussion internally and with the architect, we've made some recommendations to council about how to proceed. We're recommending accepting the alternate prices for siding and seating, be consistent in siding to align with the current SEC footprint at a generally lower price point, and then nominal cost savings for seed over sod, recognizing the time of the year which the seed would be applied, which would be August, September of next year. We'd be recommending acceptance of the separate price items for the walkway, the parking lot, wider doorways for increased accessibility, millwork and kitchen equipment, which must be included, and the plumbing chases in the main hall. And in regards to the two other separate price items, which are kind of you choose one or the other, we'd be recommending temporary heating in the main hall rather than temporary HVAC. The reason why is that if we take the temporary HVAC out of the base bid, the cost savings from removing it more than offset the projected revenue that we'd gain if we had it in the overall bid. Ultimately, we save money doing it this way. So I guess to sum it all up, if council chooses to go in that direction and take staff's recommendations for alternative prices, separate price items, many of which should be included, and the choice of the temporary heating over temporary HVAC, the second table in the report notes that the effective base bid would be $2,928,070 as the low bid. We'd include HST on top of that. Now, the municipality would pay upfront 13% HST. We are recouped 11.24% of that. The effective rate is 1.76. That's included in the table. The recommended contingency is on top of the total bid. The total construction cost would be $3,272,411.03 awarded to PK Construction. Now, that's just the construction cost. Council needs to be cognizant of the total project cost. Total project cost includes architecture on top of that. So far, we have claimed through ISIP $117,000. We have $9,000 in outstanding invoices at this time. And there is likely another estimated $75,000 through architecture for contract admin as well. We have installed a new well at the SEC. This has been operationalized currently through the levy, has not been claimed through ISIP, and is required to service the new expansion due to the size of the expansion and the additional fixtures. And we have also, through an RFQ award, started the refurbishment of a few outbuildings in the Stratfordville Community Park. This was awarded through RFQ 2501, awarded on August the 21st, at a cost of $25,535. Again, at this point in time, that is handled through the capital budget, which is levy-based. Staff will also be required, after substantial completion of the project, to finalize certain items on their own with our own security and IT contractors in the expansion to ensure continuity between the expansion and the existing facility. Staff estimate the cost at this time of approximately $100,000. This has yet to be approved. If accepting of the above and including the other project costs that have been identified, the estimated total project cost is $3,614,000 inclusive of contingency instead of the original $2,003,300. So there is an estimated overage of $1,610,700, which will need to be funded either through the levy, reserves and reserve funds, or debt, or a combination of those options. Now, recognizing that the municipality does not have discretionary reserves in full to pay for the full overage, the two options presented in the report do consider a significant amount of debt. The first option is primarily debt funding. We do recommend some reserves be used. First of all would be the SEC Capital Donation Reserve and the SEC Reserve Fund with a total of a little over $50,000. This would be put toward kitchen equipment and millwork. Part of the $50,000 in these reserves comes from a $25,000 Farm Credit Canada Agri-Spirit grant received by the Stratfordville Hall Foundation and provided to the municipality. We'd also be recommending that $129,000 from the facilities reserve be used for the fire cistern. This is identified in the capital budget and was reserved earlier this year. There's an additional $43,119 that is currently identified in the applicable capital item in the budget for general construction. Total reserve use is a shade over $222,000. Council is interested in going in this direction. Debt required is approximately $1,389,000. For the debt portion, we are fully debt-free now, which is great. We have effectively $26 million in debt capacity at today's interest rates. Infrastructure Ontario, at the time of this report being drafted, advised of their 5 and 10-year rates at 3.14 and 4.9% respectively. The 5-year rate is 95 basis points less than the 10-year rate and is very attractive at this time. Now, these rates are subject to change, and you'll see next week in our Q3 variance report that these rates are actually a little bit lower than currently reported based upon yesterday's figures. Based upon $1.389 million, it is expected that the annual debt service would be approximately $169,000. Now, in respect to next year, we only anticipate to incur 6 to 9 months of debt service. So this is 84 to about 127,000, or 1.25 to 1.9% on the draft tax levy. Council may choose to authorize more debt and utilize fewer reserve funds. So this is an option that council may seek to do. This keeps our reserves more robust than the second option and allows us to leverage debt capacity at a low interest rate through IO. Option 2 uses more reserves. So instead of just the 222,000 identified, we've identified an additional 125,000 that can be used, and it's currently budgeted for in capital item FA04. The Parkland Reserve Fund can be used up to $65,000 for the walkway around the park, and that will fully cover that item. The Old Chapel parking lot can be funded at $60,000 through the Road Construction Reserve, and again, this capital item identifies it in full. Total reserve usage under this scenario is $347,456.29. The balance of this will have to be paid through debt. The debt required is $1,264,000. If we apply the same general rates to the debt scenarios, debt service comes down to $154,000 a year. Over 6 to 9 months, this is $77,000 to $115,000, or 1.15 to 1.73% on the 2026 tax levy. Now, in considering these options, there are a few other things to note. First is that we can potentially cash flow the front end of the project with our cash on hand to reduce the 2026 debt service. Generally speaking, we carry approximately $1.4 million on hand, not in reserve, for general operational needs. With this amount of money, there's the ability to use some of this to front run costs, therefore decrease the how early we need to potentially bring a debenture bylaw to council to draw the debt. If we are even able to delay by 3 months, we save potentially $40,000, 0.6-ish% on the levy for next year. Another thing to note is the substantial completion date. So while this report does focus on the merits of alternative and separate pricing and primarily makes recommendations in regard to those items and municipal preference, council should be aware that a couple of the bids are non-compliant, in our opinion, with the substantial completion date that we've identified as part of the tender documents. We are looking at a substantial completion date of August the 21st of next year. We require to have the main hall and access to it for the election, which is in October. We can handle a little bit of slush, a little bit of delay, but we do need the facility ready for our use. Couple of the contractors identified in the report provided timelines that do not meet that deadline. Council can choose to uphold the deadline as identified as October 21st next year as part of their decision making. For the 2025 surplus, what I can say is that the municipality at this time does anticipate another budget surplus, which is great. However, we can't reasonably estimate the amount with a quarter left in the fiscal year. And there is always the chances of unforeseen expenses. Council, as normal, will receive the 2025 surplus report in February of next year, in which will identify any surplus. Council may, at that time, allocate any surplus to the reserve, the facilities reserve, to be used for this project, which will decrease the debt requirements under either option presented. The last two items deal with specific capital projects. So alignment with the asset management plan financial strategy is a consideration. Council has adopted the financial strategy in accordance with OREG 58817. The financial strategy identifies that the municipality's non-core asset portfolio is only 14%. That leaves 86% as core infrastructure. Expansion of the SEC is expansion of the non-core portfolio, and given funding gaps identified in the funding strategy and the relatively small percentage of the municipality's assets that are non-core, there are two considerations for council to weigh. The first is identifying a reasonable amount of debt to allocate to non-core. So if you consider that we have $26 million in debt and we have 14% of our assets as non-core, it may be reasonable to allocate up to $3.64 million in debt to non-core to align with that 14%. The other consideration is our core need that's coming up. We have $90 million identified in water, wastewater, and stormwater coming up in the 10-year capital that will need to be addressed in some way, shape, or form, particularly if council chooses to move forward with an expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. This is currently outstanding, but it has been budgeted for. The core need, including Vienna stormwater renewal, which is upcoming but not within the 10-year window, is a total of $105 million. Now, our debt capacity is 26. So we will need significant components of that debt capacity to fund core infrastructure. So council may weigh this and determine that it chooses to have more of the debt available for core infrastructure. The final one is the SEC capital projects if we do not move forward. When this project was conceptualized in 2019, it combined a number of capital projects that had to be addressed within a short period of time. The first one I want to identify is the HVAC replacement. The HVAC here is at the end or past its useful life. And we have been incurring increased costs on the HVAC over the last 4 years to keep it operational. It will have to be replaced regardless. If we don't move forward and have to do it as a standalone, full system replacement is approximately $135,000. If we don't move forward, the SHF may still want a kitchen, and we'll have to look at a server renovation as identified during our delegations tonight. We have no way to ballpark this figure since we haven't really looked into construction and architecture costs to do so. There is the opportunity to expand the servery. And if we expand the servery, it may be beneficial to also expand the second floor, which is the municipal office. Cost for this may be over $500,000, $600,000, and will have to be funded somehow. There's still the question of the concession food booth. The one that we currently hasn't been used in a significant period of time. And if we want to have a similar level of service and have a concession booth, we'll have to undergo a structural review, identifying a scope of work to rehabilitate it and make it serviceable. These costs, ballpark $125 to $200 at this time. The new SEC well was already installed at $18,477. Manager of Public Works in a previous report identified that this would have had to happen in 5 or 10 years anyways. This would have been a cost that would have had to have been incurred. It's also worth noting that if we move forward and there is a kitchen expansion, it's best practice to have cistern for fire protection. That's $129,000. To date, we have incurred architecture costs of $126,000. We have been recouped to date 86 of that. If we do not move forward, we will have to pay ISIP back that 86. That will have to come out of somewhere. And we haven't even discussed if council wants to move forward with the old chapel parking lot or with the walkway around the park. We will not get the same prices if we do them as standalone as offered up in this tender package. Based upon all that information, council, I do apologize. I know it is a lot of information. Staff can really approach this one of two ways, and we can argue it either way, whether to proceed or not. We don't provide a specific recommendation on whether to award. However, we can confirm a few things for your information. We confirm the availability of reserves and funds for the expansion as outlined in options 1 and 2. Additional reserves and funds do exist but are not recommended for use. Avoiding additional reserve use will ensure that we have adequate funds for other projects should they arise or if there's an unforeseen expense to address. Staff confirm adequate debt capacity for this project and have identified a preference for a 5-year IO rate at current rates over a 10-year rate. We do question whether the project aligns with prudent infrastructure spending due to costs associated with expanding non-core in light of significant core need. However, we do note that up to 3.64 million to non-core may be reasonable given that it is that percentage of our asset class in our AMP. This project would require no more than $1.4 million as identified in the report for debt. We also note that should this not go forward and council wants to break up the project into its component pieces and move forward, that we will have to spend over $1 million on standalone projects to get a similar level of service and address specific needs that have to be addressed, like the current concession booth, the HVAC system. If council does choose to move forward, we are recommending option 1, which is more debt, but is also more reserves. We would recommend the award to the tender to PK Construction in the effective tendered amount of $2,928,070 plus applicable HST, which is subject to the following inclusions and exclusions. Accept alternate prices for siding and seed. Accept separate prices for the walkway, the parking lot, wider doorways, the millwork and kitchen equipment, and plumbing chases in the main hall. Accept temporary heating only and reject temporary HVAC in the main hall. That council would authorize the use of the following reserves and reserve funds for aspects of the project. First, the facility reserve, $707,000. The SCC capital donations reserve in the amount of $48,129.42, and the SCC reserve fund in the amount of $2,207.87. Council would allocate on top of the award and to be funded through debt $100,000 for finishing works associated with information technology, security, communications, and other necessary items. And 10% of the tender award of $2,928,070 to act as contingency for the project. In total, council would authorize the use of up to $1.389 million in debt through Infrastructure Ontario and further request that staff report to council in Q1 2026 with the 2025 surplus report identifying any 2025 surplus that can be potentially allocated to the SCC expansion project to reduce the requirement for IO debt. And that's council would direct staff to include in the 2026 draft operating budget a debt service estimate associated with the upper limit of the authorized IO debt. If council proceeds in this manner, we bring back a bylaw to enter into the agreement with PK Construction for the work. We would also come back at some point in 2026 when required to do so with a bylaw to authorize the debenture borrowing through IO with the amount required. At this time, realistic target for that bylaw may be Q2 for borrowing in Q3. And that would align with our audited financial statements. It will also align with our annual review of our asset management plan. The last thing I want to note is that if council does not choose to award the tender due to cost pressures or any other reason, the project is effectively unable to proceed. Council will be required to pass a resolution to return the funds to ISIP. Based upon previous experience with the scope reduction application through this program, there is not enough time between now and the grant substantial completion date of March 31st, 2027 to properly apply for, review, receive approval for, and proceed with a reduced or otherwise altered project scope, including any request to alter the grant fund allocation to another municipal non-core project. A lot of information, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have at this time. Myself and the treasurer are available with any questions you may have. And with that, I will leave it with you and council to deliberate.
Thank you very much for that report, Thomas. And you're right, there's a lot of information here. Let's open it up for any questions or comments from members of council. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question on that last piece, Thomas, if you don't mind. I was always under the impression over the years that grant applications are specific to per project. And it just mentions here about like including any request to alter the grant fund allocation to another municipal non-core project. That doesn't exist in this case.
It does not exist in this case. Consideration generally in a grant program, if you're going to apply to rescope or to change the project, you'd have to complete an entirely new application. It's not as simple as, de-scoping a currently approved project. If you were to move it to another non-core project, you'd have to provide all the supporting documentation to the program as if you're making a full grant application so they could reallocate funds. In this case, that's not the case. And even if it were, there wouldn't be the time to do that, get approval for it, and then move forward with the project.
Additional questions?
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Thompson?
is there anything in your projections on the budget that is not a requirement of the ICP program?
The only thing specifically identified, and it's a separate price item that was included as a nice to have in case we can get a good price, would be the old chapel parking lot. The other items such as wider doorways provide, additional accessibility. It's a nominal cost. Everything else has to be included.
Thomas, with respect to reconditioning of the concession booth rehabilitation, if we decide to go that route, does that include upgrades to accessible washrooms?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it would require a structural report first and foremost, and we get something back regarding accessibility. But given that it is a municipal facility that's been mothballed and would be reopened, we'd be looking at accessible washrooms as part of that. So there would be a cost associated with significant renos to those washrooms.
Thank you. Additional questions? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just ask a question about process and procedure as it comes to the mention a few times around a referendum. Can you tell me what that looks like?
To be honest with you, Mr. Mayor, or through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have that answer unless I can defer to the clerk and she has some input, as this would likely fall through her, but that would probably require us to report back on what that would entail.
Through your worship, I don't have much more to add other than that is what council members are appointed for, is to speak on behalf of the people.
Okay. Councilor Chilcott.
Thomas, I know it's in here somewhere, but I can't find it. What is the cost of the chapel parking if we were to remove that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it isn't specifically identified. It's actually included as part of the base bid. What I can say is that it's $55,000.
Councilor Chilcott.
Sorry, and that will be needed at some point regardless of whether this goes through or not.
It has been considered before as a standalone item. If we were to do it as a standalone item, it would be more than 55,000.
Thomas, take us through the IT requirements. Additional 100,000 has been identified. Please expand on what that entails.
Security cameras, door contacts, similar to what we currently have. We'd have swipe cards set up at various doors with various permissions like we currently do. I don't want to go too in depth on what that would entail because that is technically security of our facility and should be the actual technical stuff should be closed session discussion since it is security of property.
I was hoping for a higher level.
Yeah.
I was trying to impress upon the fact that if it's requiring conduits and running of wires and whatever else, if you're doing the construction, this is the time to do it.
Conduits, wires, door contacts, swipe card location, security cameras, all that sort of stuff, fire alarms. I see Steve and Harry nodding over there. A lot of it has to do with those sorts of things. And we would go through our IT and our security contractors for those because they know our building, rather than, contracting that out through somebody.
All right, thank you. Any additional questions? Councilor Emerson?
Yeah, there's a lot of numbers flying around and everything, so I just want, if you could, I'm wondering if you could, please summarize option one and what the total project cost is, plus the total amount of debt you want to borrow, and what is exactly coming out from reserves,
Sure.
and what would be the yearly payment, to the municipality?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councilor. Total project cost all in for both options is $3,614,000. Option one requires $1,389,000, $89,000 in debt. We'll be using $222,000 from reserves. If we pull $1.389 million at, say, current interest rates offered by Infrastructure Ontario, the total debt paid out per year for a 12-month period would be $169,000. Next year, if we cash flow some of the money, you can split that in half, so it would be 6 months. We'd be looking at approximately $84,000, which is 1.25% of the levy. For option two, same project total amount. The reserve amount, however, is $347,000, which means that the debt we require is $1,264,000. Debt service for that reduces slightly for a full year being $154,000, which means that over 6 months, you're $77,000 and you're 1.15% on the levy next year.
So, like 3% is pretty cheap money. I wish I could borrow it myself because I could make money with that. But if we take 14% of 26 million, that's 3.64. And if we were to budget half of that for, not necessarily budget, but earmark half of that for it, so 7% of 26 million, that's a kind of decent amount of money for non-core improvements for this and maybe throughout the whole municipality. And I don't think we're risking the financial future of our municipality by doing that, like earmarking that. Not necessarily, but just saying that this is our wish list or whatever.
Okay. Okay. You're talking about tacking on additional projects.
No, not at this point, but I'm just saying hold that as a concept for future things that come up. I don't know, for example, like if that parking is, paid parking is financed and stuff, we can use that money to cash flow the washroom improvements and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So, okay, so rather than getting too confused with various different concepts, can we just use that as a discussion point when we get into our capital budget? Say
Exactly, that's
November
what I
4th?
just want to point out.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll just try to deal with this particular.
Yep,
tonight?
yep, yep.
Well, thank you. Okay. Any other comments? Councilor Frozen.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. A contingency, 200 and a lot of money, 200 and some $1,000. That bothers me about the whole thing, right? But how likely do you think that just in case money will be used? Yeah, can you speak from previous projects or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's really tough as it depends on the project. Normally with something like this, we'd be recommended between 10 or 15% carry for contingency. The architect was very positive about the tender, the results we received, and that all the costs were generally fairly well clustered, suggesting the tender documents were clear and were very well understood. So they recommended the low end of that. with respect to what sort of contingency may come up or be required, I really can't speak to that. This would be the largest, facilities project I've personally seen in a municipality and, municipality I've worked for. So I don't have input on what might actually be incurred.
So just to help me understand, if all goes well, it could be $200,000 less.
If all goes well and contingency is used minimally, yes, then there could be $200,000 that we just simply don't use. The money is there for it's in just in case money.
Further to that, through you,
Yep.
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor Emerson.
did the contractors that bid on those tenders have a track record of being above or below their estimated costs?
I don't have that information.
Anything else? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. For a matter of procedure, process, I'm just curious if the wish list, obviously, the original application included a number of, obviously, over the 10-year period. They would be reallocated back into the budget if we do not proceed with the grant?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Deputy Mayor. I've talked to the treasurer about this and we haven't published the capital budget yet because we were waiting specifically for this item. So if council doesn't move forward, what we'd end up doing is we'd be taking that FA04 capital item, essentially blanking it and bringing to council that we need council's direction for how to fill it out at the capital budget. And what sort of timelines you want for standalone items. So we'd be looking for council's direction on that. Realistically, yes, if you want a servery expansion, if you want to do the concession booth, if you want the HVAC, the walkway, if you want these as standalone items, we would need direction at that time for how you want to break that out, how you want to fund it, what years, that sort of thing.
Anything else? Should council wish to proceed, I do offer an opinion that I do believe that the option one offers the most flexibility, safeguarding your reserves for something that may or may not occur. I do recognize that option two offers a lower debt draw. And at this point, the debt draw would vastly depend upon what the situation looks like down well into the project, if that's how it's going to go. Any more questions, comments, or concerns from anyone on council items? Councillor Chilcott.
I just had one question. When you were talking about possibly putting things back onto the levy, you mentioned expanding the office upstairs. Without putting it, like if we went through the ISIP, how would you expand the offices?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm sort of confused with the question. Do you mean like, can we do that through the grant?
I guess, I know you can't do it through the grant, but we're not going to build on upstairs. So we have to make room for the offices somewhere. I was just wondering how, or you won't need to because we'll have a new meeting room.
Well, we do have a new meeting room, but we also, we're limited with the office space that we have upstairs. Under the current grant program, there's no consideration for expanding the offices. if we ever get to the point where we have to, it would be done as its own capital item. And we'd have to look at the viability of doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I don't have a fancy speech or anything, but I'll do my best to get through a couple of the points that I've been thinking of over the last little bit. And I just want to take a moment to thank the community, the ones that have reached out and provided feedback. I do thank you very much. I value your feedback and I appreciate that you took the time to reach out. So thank you for that. In 2019 to now, 6 years, right? Like a lot changes in 6 years. And if you, if I would have looked at the original plans today for the grant application, would I have supported it? No. So it's difficult because it was a great opportunity at the time, and then just a domino effect of very terrible occurrences, starting with COVID and moving on down. It just was not a great few years looking at this project. So in 2022, when we did the D-scope and that came back, I did express concerns about cost overages at that time. And I did say around the horseshoe that I was uncomfortable supporting anything over 1.02 million on the tax levy. And so I'm going to stick with that position. I am feeling a little uncomfortable. If I was looking at it from a lens of my own personal finances, after the hurdle of paying off the existing Ojibwa debt, which was of course the focus of the last two councils, and we've worked extremely hard and we've asked a lot from our community to go back into debt 6 months after being out of debt. I really struggle with that. I just can't, I'm not comfortable at all with that. So, you know, that's my opinion right now, and I'll leave it up to the rest of council to also make an opinion. Thank you.
Well, now. Okay. Any more questions, comments? Council, we have three potential options before us this evening. There is an opportunity if you wish to proceed and take option 1 and award something to the contract to PK Construction. Option 2, which is more reliance on reserves, award to PK Construction. Or option 3, do nothing. A little more involved than that, but still. Option 3 does have consequences as well. Councillor Chilcott.
Thank you. I believe if we're going to do anything, we should follow staff's recommendation for option 1. And we do have debt coming up for other projects that would have been covered in that. So we're going to be having debt regardless. Do we want to get as much bang for a buck? You know, they're 50-cent dollars, right? Basically. So that's my thoughts.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Chilcott, just to move the discussion along then, do you wish to make a motion on the, was that a motion?
Yes, it is, yes.
All right. Megan, do you want to read that out or would you like me to? Want me to read that? All right. Moved by Councillor Chilcott that report CAO 4125 regarding tender award Bayham Stratford Community Center expansion, ISIP Community Culture and Recreation Stream be received for information. And that the Council of the Corporation and Municipality of Bayham awards the tender to PK Construction, Inc. in their effective tendered amount of $2,928 and $70. Let's do that again, $2,928,070 plus applicable HST, which is subject to the following inclusions and exclusions. Accept alternate prices for siding and seed. Accept separate price items for accessible walkway around Stratford Community Park, Old Chapel parking lot and walkway, wider doorways, millwork and kitchen equipment, plumbing chases and main hall. Accept temporary heating only, reject temporary HVAC for the main hall. And that council authorizes the use of the following reserves and reserve funds to fund aspects of the project. The SCC Capital Donations Reserve in the amount of $48,129.42. The SCC Reserve Fund in the amount of $2,207.87. The Facilities Reserve in the amount of $707,000. And that the council allocates on top of the award and to be funded through debt, $100,000 for finishing works associated with information technology, security, communications, and other necessary items. 10% of the tender award value of $2,928,070 to act as a contingency for the project. And that council authorizes the use of up to $1,389,000 in debt through Infrastructure Ontario for funding for this project. And that staff be directed to report to council in Q1 of 2026 with the 2025 surplus report, identifying any 2025 surplus funds that can potentially be allocated to the SCC expansion project to reduce the requirement of IO debt, and that staff be directed to include the 2026 draft operating budget, a debt service estimate associated with the upper limit of the authorized IO debt. So moved by Councillor Chilcott. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Froese. I'll call the question. All in favor? And I will vote for it as well. Opposed? It's still carried. Okay. Okay, we have the confirming bylaw. So I need a mover and seconder that confirming bylaw number 2025-060 be read first, second, and third time and finally passed. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Chilcott, Councillor Froese, all in favor? Carried. Adjournment. The council meeting be adjourned at, what time is it? 7:08. 7:08 p.m. Mover and seconder. Councillor Froese, Councillor Emerson, all in favor? Carried. We are adjourned.